Well, hello, and welcome to our latest Canary coaching session. In today's session, we learn how to configure and use the MQTT Publisher. My name is Sean Ebersole. I'm a solutions consultant here at Canary, and I will lead you through the training today. So please feel free to use the Zoom Q&A feature to ask any questions you have. Now, before I begin the live portion of our coaching session, I first want to provide you with a little background on our publisher. So the main purpose of the Canary Publisher service is to provide the ability to share data being stored in the Canary Historian with third-party systems in real time. To word it a little differently, we are live streaming data out to a third-party system as soon as it arrives in the Canary Historian. This quote, live streaming of data packets, or we call them payloads, from the Canary Publisher is sent in two different formats, Sparkplug B or JSON. The Sparkplug B payload is sent over MQTT 3.1.1 protocol, while the JSON payload is sent over a WebSocket connection. So once we understand how the data is sent from the publisher, it will also help to know what type of systems Canary can send the data to. The main types of systems that Canary publishes data to are MQTT brokers and geographic information systems. Today, we will only be focusing on publishing data using the MQTT Sparkplug B payload to a Mosquito broker. So I want to switch gears now and show you the live demonstration portion of configuring the MQTT Publisher to send data to an MQTT broker. But first, I need to make sure I have an MQTT broker available to publish to. So as you can see on the screenshot to the right here, the Canary system installer now has an additional tab at the top that will list other third-party components available for installation. So far, we have just one component listed, which happens to be the Mosquito MQTT server. So let me go ahead and get started with installing the MQTT Mosquito broker. So if you're already using Canary, you may still have the Canary installer somewhere on your machine. If not, you can reach out to Canary, to our support, and request the newest download link to the newest installer. So I'll load that here on my screen. So as I was just showing you in the slide presentation, here is the third-party components tab, if you're not familiar. And here you can see there's the option to install the Mosquito MQTT server. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. Now, I already have the other components of the system installed. So you'll notice my install button is grayed out. And that would be the same for you if you already have Canary installed. All I simply need to do is hit the repair change button, and it will go ahead and run through the installation process. I'll go ahead, while that's finished, I'm going to open up my Canary administrator. Everything's running a little slower on my machine because I'm also using Zoom, which eats up a lot of my computer's resources. So you're seeing a process that usually takes a little quicker than what it's doing right now, but it'll get there. Now it's making some further progress. There we go. We're going to install. It's going to give me the destination folder. That looks good. And we're finished. Okay. All right, success. So I'm going to go ahead and close out. And now my admin is loading up here. So there we go. Okay. So now you'll notice here on my Canary administrator, my publisher tile. Now I have one existing session running right now. I'm going to go ahead and open that up here. So just to give you a little background on the first page here with where it shows my connections, you see there's three different tabs at the bottom of my publisher. The first one is the status. So this it is what it says. It just shows me the status of any existing connections. So on my existing connection, you'll see there's the name column, which obviously is just a name identifying the publishing session. Now the type, this is going to be either MQTT like this one, or it'll say WebSocket. Now, as I mentioned in the slideshow, we are able to send JSON payloads over a WebSocket connection. Now we're not going to really dive into that subject today. That'll be a different training that will cover that. But then we have our endpoint, which is just the URI of the server and the port number where the data is being published to. Now that port number in this case is 1883. So that's what we use for an MQTT unsecure endpoint. Now, if I wanted to send it over a secure endpoint, then that would be an 8883 port number. So next then we have the serialization. So, remember we said before we're sending MQTT protocol over a Sparkplug B serialization. And enabled is just meaning, is it true or false? So of course this session's running, so it's true in this case. And then the state, I'm connected right now. Now when I first set up, you'll see the state would default to none until I make a connection. And then it will show how long I've been connected. So I've just been connected here just for a couple minutes because I just launched the broker, and it shows how much data has been sent since the last startup of the session. And then it'll show how many total number of tags have been published since the start of the session. Now the assets column, that would show the total number of assets that have been published since the start of the session, but that only applies when we're using that WebSocket connection. And obviously if I wanted to disable this, I could hit disable. When the session is disabled, it would say enable. So it's just a toggle switch between starting and stopping the connection. Now we want to come next to the configuration tab here at the bottom. So this is where we can configure our actual publishing session. So in the name field, I'm just going to call this, we'll call it Canary Coaching. Now here's the type again. We're going to go with a MQTT payload. So if I was to select the WebSocket, I'd get totally different fields here. Like I said, again, we'll talk about this in an upcoming session, but I'm going to keep it on MQTT. So that right now we only use Sparkplug B as the supported format for MQTT. Now the client ID, so this is a name given to the publisher client, and it really needs to be unique. That's why this is a very long number here with a lot of digits, because if there's another client that would have the same client ID connecting to the broker, then the second one with the same ID overwrites the first one. So the last one in wins. So the client ID is very important to be unique. Now you can even, I can name this whatever I wanted to. I could, just type something in here randomly as well if I'd like. Now the other important fields here are the Sparkplug B group ID. So this is kind of the mapping, and you'll see as we are sending data out, this would be the name topic space, so to speak. You might even be able to see in my tooltip, the group ID. It gives an example of how that would look. But the group ID, that's the topic name in the Sparkplug B structure. And then the next level is going to be your node ID. That's the node topic name in the Sparkplug B structure. And then finally, your Sparkplug B device ID. That's going to be the device topic name. Now there's another field that I have blank by default, and that's the Sparkplug B primary ID. Now this is optional. What this does, it's a unique ID that must be configured on the publisher and the subscriber side so that the publisher is aware when a subscriber is online or offline. Now, if a subscriber is using the same primary host ID and it disconnects from the broker, the publisher will be notified and it'll stop sending data to the broker. So if we're utilizing primary ID, the publisher will not send data to a broker until a subscriber connects using that same primary ID. I'm not really concerned about it for this session, so I'll leave that blank. Now, there's a checkmark box for alias tags. Now, this allows the publisher to alias tag names using an integer index. So that would basically reduce the amount of data that's being sent. By default, that's usually unchecked, but the option is there. If you feel you'd like to do that to reduce the amount of space or reduce the amount of data being sent, and then that ties in as well with compression. Mine is defaulted to none, but if you want to use compression options when you send the data, you have the gzip and the deflate options. Now, durable stream, this checkmark box, that's used in conjunction with that Sparkplug B primary ID. So it allows the publisher to buffer data for subscribers that disconnect who are using the same primary ID. So when that same subscriber reconnects, the publisher will start sending data from the time the subscriber disconnected, so there's no data loss. So it's kind of similar to store and forward in a way. Now, the publish opportunities, there's, mine by default is do not or don't include. So that means that we're never publishing properties when we send, when we're streaming the data. Now then there's an option for birth and change. So here properties are only published when a new tag comes online or the property of a tag changes. And then there's the option of every tag value change. The properties will be published with each tag value change. So again, how much traffic do we want to have? This would tie in as well to quality of service. By default, there's always the QoS that equals 0, which is at most once. Now, if you have questions on this, keep in mind, a little over a month ago, we did a coaching session on our MQTT Collector, and we dove pretty deep into these topics. So I'd encourage you to definitely watch that on the recorded coaching session section of the Canary community. But just in summary, the QoS or quality of service, it's basically it's the level agreement between the publisher and the broker that a particular message has been received. So at most once means there is no guarantee the broker received the message because we're only just sending it at one time and there's no communication back and forth. It's also known as a term fire and forget. But if you set the quality of service to 1, that guarantees that the message has been sent at least once to the broker. Now it can be sent multiple times until the broker confirms it has received the message. And then the highest level of QoS 2, it's the highest and it's the slowest level of security, but it guarantees that the message is sent exactly once. Again, there's more information that we have in that video on the MQTT Collector. Now the views host, so this would be the server name of the view service to which the publisher is reading data from. Now mine's defaulted to local host because my views service is running on my local machine. Now, if you're in a larger organization, you have other Canary historians, like here at Canary, I can connect to other machines and connect to their views host. Now, once I'm connected, I can also choose a views path. So because I'm connected to my own machine, I can see here are the different virtual views that I've created. So I could pick one of my virtual views and kind of drill down a certain, maybe to this site. So maybe I want to have access to all the tags at that Poplar site under the substation virtual view. Now I could keep drilling down depending on the structure of my tag hierarchy. Maybe I want to get to an individual station at Poplar, but I'm just going to leave it at that level. Now, when I do that, do I want to also include the properties of those tags, with this? Now, by default, I leave that unchecked. Again, I'm not, really too concerned about the properties. Now, the servers, field. Now this would be the URI of the MQTT server to which my publisher is going to send the data to. Now this one actually right now is my existing one. Now if I'm going to create a new one here though, just to show you what it defaults to. Okay, so here's my new one. I actually overwrote my previous one, so I'm going to actually well, we'll just call this one Canary Coaching 2. But you can see down here now, when you first create a new publish session, it always defaults to the local host in the unsecure port, that 1883 I talked about earlier. And pick my local host here again, because I switched to a new session. Okay. Now, if I was going to do the secure port, the 8883, I would need to enter a username and password because it'd be a secure connection. And I'd also need to enable the SSL TLS option, but I'm going to leave that unchecked for now. So at this point, really, I've created my Canary Coaching 2 publishing session. It's going to send data from the Poplar substation across to the server at localhost. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that change. And now I'm going to go back to the status page, and I can see now I have the first one here at the top was the one that was already running, sending to a Hive MQ broker. And here is my actual new one I just created. You can see it's the enabled state's false. It's in the state itself is none. So if I hit enable, that'll go ahead and fire that session up, and I can see it's connected. And I can see that there is some data being sent there. Now, before we take a look at how we can view that data, I did want to cover one other tab at the bottom, which is the settings tab here. So for the settings, this would be just the settings for my global settings for my publisher. Now there's the first setting, the delayed start seconds. And this is just a general delay in seconds from when the services start until data is actually published. It'd be kind of bad if you tried to send data right away and the service wasn't running. We don't want to lose any published data. So it's good to have at least a 5-second buffer there to delay the start of sending the data. Now the views user, this is the name of the client server that will be used to connect to the view service. So this is my machine, actually, I'm on here. So this is used to control who has access to the data before being published. And then there's always this views users GUID. It's basically a unique ID accompanied with the views user, identifying the client connecting to the view service. So this is a layer of security here that goes along with my views user. And then there's the live data check interval. So that's the frequency at which the publisher service checks for new data values within the view service. So it's always defaulted to 1 second. And then there's the views change check interval. So what this does is this is the frequency at which the publisher service checks for changes in the view service as it relates to new tags or assets. So typically, you're probably not going to have an administrator making a lot of changes to the views. So instead of trying to call that views check change every second, it's good to set that for at least 5 minutes. It could be longer than that, really. The idea here is you just don't want to miss any changes in that view and have an interruption in your data stream. And then finally, the durable stream tag save interval. Now this is the setting that applies strictly to the MQTT side of the publisher. And this is the frequency at which the publisher writes the status of the tag sent and their value to disk. So if the connection is lost or the machine goes down, the publisher can know where it left off when it resumes again. And then there's the client certificate. So the publisher service will use this certificate when making a secure connection to an MQTT broker or a WebSocket. So, to enable secure connection, the user would need to ensure that enable SSL TLS checkmark box is checked, back here on the configuration. And then you see there's a client certificate checkmark box, and that would need to be checked as well to start that client or that certificate encryption. So those are the settings. So back on my status here, I can see that I have my session running. Now what I want to do is I want to actually take a look at what the data looks like that we're publishing. So I'll need some type of a MQTT client to view that. So if I actually have one installed here, this is an MQTT client. This is MQTT.fx. You can actually do a free download online for this. So the very first thing is going to recognize any MQTT brokers I have on this machine. So I could go ahead and connect to that. And in this case, what I want to do, since this is a client, I'm not publishing at this point. I need to subscribe. And I could, if I recall the namespace that I used on, if I go back to my broker here to the configuration, well, helps if I apply there. Okay. I can go back and see, the format, it'll be SPB 1.0/ and then the group ID, etc. But to make it easy, I can also, just by putting in this hashtag and hit subscribe, that'll allow me to be able to go in and subscribe to that. Now, curious enough, nothing's happening. And you watched that I installed the broker. One thing I forgot in the process, I need to go into my my services and make sure that the actual service is set for the Mosquito broker to start. So if I go into my Mosquito broker, let me make sure, I'm going to just restart that. Okay, so it's running now. Now I'm going to connect and subscribe. Well, let's just see what we have going on here. I have everything in here. Do not include the most. Got that. Got my right server. Status. Ah, there we go. I had to re-enable it because I restarted the service. So let's go ahead and enable that. There we are. We're connected again. So let me go back into, there we go. Now we have some information coming in here. So you can see I'm subscribed. I can actually see I have timestamps, starting to come in. There's my birth certificate. If you're familiar with terminology with Sparkplug B, there's always a birth and death certificate when things are started and stopped. So I can see that I have connection here. Now, if I go back into my system here, I'm connecting to, if I go into my settings, I'm connecting to this Poplar. Now, when I'm looking at this, I'm not really seeing any changes. So that tells me there's something, my publisher's connected, but there's something at that historian level that may not be operating correctly. So if I come into my historian tile here, let's just take a look. So here is that actual data set. So I'm not getting any updates to this data set, which I know why. If I come into I have a data generation tool, which actually Jeff covered that last week. So I'm actually getting data into that data set by using my data generator. So I'm going to actually open up that file for Substation, and I'm going to start logging. Okay, so now you see I have updates coming in. So if I go back to my MQTT client, there we go. Now you see we're getting live updates coming in. So things are working now. Now that really at this point we're done. We know that the publisher is connected and it's publishing data from my local view service, and I can see all the updates here. But just to kind of bring this full circle, if I was to go back into my Canary admin and the MQTT Collector tile, I'm going to open that up. And again, we've already conducted a Canary coaching session on the MQTT Collector. So I'm not going to really explain a lot here, but what I want to do is I want to configure a new connection session, and I'm going to subscribe my collector to that same Mosquito broker. So what I need to do is come in and configure, make sure that that's the correct address. We're doing unsecure, so I'm going to connect that way. And inside of my subscriptions, I'm going to subscribe to that topic, and there's the hashtag. So, I know that the topic on the publisher as well started with that same SPB 1.0. Now, what I want to do here, though, is I want to say, okay, I want to create a data set in the historian to send this to. So I'm going to create one called Canary Coaching Publisher. And I want to automatically log all tags once I make that connection. Okay. And I can see that there, the historian machine name's correct. I'm going to, collect from my local host. So at this point, if I apply, now if I go back to my status page, you can see at the very bottom, here was that new connection I was going to make. Oh, I forgot to name it. Not that that's super important, but I'll just call this as well, Canary Coaching Publisher. So I'll go back to my status, and I'm going to go ahead and enable that MQTT collector session. So there we go. We've subscribed to the 24 tags that we were publishing to on that broker. And I can see I'm getting live updates. So now if I go back to the historian, you can see I have a data set all ready to go here. It has updates coming in, so I can actually go in and see my daily file and drill down into that daily file. And guess what? There's the canary.publishing.service namespace, and there's the actual tag names. You can see there's the 24 tags that if I go over to the publisher, you can see that, there's those same 24 tags that we're publishing the data to up into the MQTT broker. So basically, I'm taking the data out of my historian through that view service, publishing it to a Mosquito broker, and I just created a new data set of my historian, and I've subscribed using the MQTT Collector, and I'm sending that data from the broker down into that new data set. So I made a complete circle here in my historian. Just going back here, this is the data set where we're publishing data from, and then I subscribe with the MQTT Collector, and now I'm collecting that data right back into the historian in a different data set. Now that would not be a real world use case, but hopefully that helps you understand the flow of publishing and subscribing to a broker. So that's all for today. Now, is there any questions? If you haven't already submitted questions, feel free to do so. Let me just see if there was any questions that came in. I'm not seeing any questions, so keep in mind, we'll have this recording available soon on our Canary community under the previously recorded coaching sessions. And feel free to check out, I think we have about 20 or so sessions recorded there now. So there's a lot of good information on that site. So feel free to check that out. And just want to thank everybody for joining today's coaching session. Have a great day.